Welcome back to another episode of Trading Secrets. Today I am joined by two of the recent fan favorites from Netflix, The Circle, John Franklin and Alyssa Ljub. The Circle, by the way, the first people we've ever had on, just so you know. We're breaking that right here, right now. John and Alyssa were participants on season 4 of the hit reality TV show, which contestants maneuver their way through a game in which they can only communicate with other contestants via text on a specialized social media platform. Although neither of them were crowned champion of their season, they have each been able to generate strong social media followings after their season wrapped up in May of 2022. In addition to their social media influencing, both John and Alyssa have started to carve their own ways into separate specific careers. I love that. Wrote the Restart Roadmap. Different careers, especially from a reality TV show, is right up the alley of this podcast. John being in stand-up comedy and Alyssa being in sex relationship coaching. Between The Circle and each other's unique career paths, we're going to hit it all. And I said right before the show started, we could take this interview 8 different directions. We got sex relationship coaching. We got comedian. We got Circle. We got all things. Thank you guys for being here on Trading Secrets.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely. I'm super stoked about it.
I love it. Well, let's jump into The Circle. First and foremost.
Let's do it.
I always am curious because everyone's got a different story.
Yeah.
How'd you get discovered? How did they find you to be on this?
I had just applied, but the reason I applied is because I enjoyed the show and I was living in LA and I was working for Lance Bass at the time, and his assistant was on the show and catfished as Lance. And so she had such a great experience and I was like, you know what? It felt like it was like so close. I could see it.
Have you ever applied for any other show?
No.
Have you had the desire to go on any other reality show?
I would do like a Big Brother thing now that I've done The Circle.
To do Big Brother.
I feel like I would dominate.
That's like my dream.
I could give a crap about like who wins in sports.
Yeah.
I watch it for like the camaraderie, for like a nice beer, but I don't really care who wins.
Sure.
When I was on that show, I was an actual psychopath. I had like a wall of notes that were notated with different like ticks for facts that I thought were relevant. So much so that a producer came into my room the day after I got blocked and was like, so I gotta be honest, what you did on the show was not what we thought you were gonna do.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm sorry. And he actually told me that they had cast me to be a thirst trap. And then I didn't
Did you have to do personality tests before the show?
Did we do a personality test?
Yeah, we did.
I don't remember.
We had, because you do that on The Bachelor. And my
Yeah.
theory on that is precisely this. My theory is that they know, for the most part, kind of like what role you'll play. It's like a game of chess, and they have to find each single player.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then life happens, and people go out of their realm, which is probably what happened with you.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting. Lance Bass, when you tell him that you're going to go on the show, does he support that? Does he think like, oh, great, like this is going to be a stepping stone, I'm going to loser? Like, how'd that go?
No, I was just helping him do his social media stuff. So it was low enough lift that he was so excited when I got on.
That's cool.
And funny enough, the day that I got back from the show was the day that his kids were born.
Oh my God.
And so that was like a very, it was a weird like overlap in the timelines of significance for the both of us, but he was super supportive.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
John, how'd you get found?
My sister was like, you'd be great at this. Because like my whole college life was social media. I was always doing like different kinds of content creation, this, that, and the other thing. And I applied in like November of 2020. And I never thought about it ever again because I got a full-time job.
Okay.
And then in May of 2021, I got a phone call like, we loved your audition. I was like, cool, for what? Like, I had no
Yeah,
idea
you're
what
like,
they
what
were
are you talking
talking
about?
about.
Yeah.
And can't even find the audition tape to this day. I have no idea where it is. I just sent it in, forgot about it. And we did like the whole personality testing. It was like 6 auditions, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
And like, similar to Alyssa, they cast me and everything they did was around like my Italian background.
Okay.
And I am super Italian from like New Jersey, but they were like, oh, like you gotta put on the voice.
They
and
wanted like the
all
whole
of
thing,
this.
the pizza, the pasta.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'll do it to go. But then once I got to the show, I was like, now we're playing a game. And conversely to her, I'm a super competitive guy, huge sports fan. I didn't take a note the entire time I was
Wild.
there. I was like, I'm pretending to be my mom, so their guess is as good as mine.
Now, you disguised yourself to be your mother. Did they tell you to do that, or did that come up on yourself? Did you
Yeah,
do that?
so the way that it worked out was I was auditioning to be myself through like the first 4 auditions.
Okay.
And then like the one before they told me I was going, they were like, pivot, you're going to have to catfish if you want to make it on the show.
Interesting.
And they said, who would you catfish as? And I said, my mom. I panicked and said it. It was more like, I said it very calm. There was more like a, my mom, like that. And they were like, all right, go on, let's do it. So I called my mom, shout out Carol Franklin, who that day, I called her and I said, I need 15 photos of you, no questions asked. And she did it. She had no idea I was auditioning for the show. I didn't want to tell her in case I didn't get it.
Yeah.
My dad takes her around the house, and she's taking pictures in the same blouse, just doing different house activities. And a few of them make it in the show. My favorite one is she's cooking, but there's nothing in the pot and the flame's off. And she's just got a wooden spoon in a pot. And they loved it. They loved her, and she was super stoked about it. And we end up getting on a TV show, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. That's awesome. Hindsight, when she watched it back, was she like mortified? Was she like, you nailed it? What'd she say?
My mom is supportive to a fault.
Yeah.
Like I had the conversation in the show about like tips for sex advice for a woman in her 60s, and Alyssa gives this conversation, and I'm mortified. I'm just thinking my mom's gonna watch this episode and be like, what are you doing? She called me and she said, you didn't do anything I wouldn't do.
Oh,
and that was even
maybe
worse.
Like she got you, actually. You thought you got her, she got you. All right, so you guys decide to go on the show. You play your mother. You go into a whole different realm that you didn't expect to go into.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about this. You had to take a little leave from your jobs.
Yeah.
Each of you had totally different jobs, but when you got off the show, did you return right back to work?
Well, so I was doing work with Lance, and I was an assistant to a sex coach. And so for both of them, it was all kind of social media related, and they were both very supportive. When you fly out, they give you 2 weeks notice, and then they fly you out to the UK, and then you're in a holding apartment until they drop you into the show, and you have no guarantee you're going to get on until they literally say you're getting dropped in tomorrow or whatever. So it's so stressful. And they shoot 2 seasons back to back, and they carried me over from one. So I was in England in a holding apartment with like 3 phone numbers in like a shitty 2017 Galaxy.
Yeah, it's like a burner.
It was so bad.
Yeah.
And I was completely, like, you're isolated. You have a chaperone and that terrible phone for 2 months. And I was like, oh my God.
2 months?
2 months.
Yeah, she had a worse experience than me. I went in, I did my promo stuff, and I was on the show. Like, I was all in one go.
Okay, so you were there 2 months. How long were you there?
I was there total a month.
A month. Okay, so 2 months
So
from
2
no
months.
work.
So when that was all over, I was living in LA and I was kind of done with it. I'm just an East Coast girly. I did not enjoy the environment very much. So I knew I was going to move back to New York anyway. So I wrapped up all my loose ends and then came back to New York. And then I got a corporate job so that I just had like stable income, lived with my parents, saved a bunch of money, and now I can like freelance and do like what I actually want to do.
All right, so you tell BetMGM, John, that you're going to go on the show. What do they say?
I'll never forget it. I got the call that I was going, and I said, I got to tell my boss. And I FaceTimed my boss, who doesn't work for BetMGM anymore. And he said, why are you FaceTiming me? It's like a Friday night. And I'm like, Zach, this is the craziest request I'm ever going to put in. You could say no. But I said, I got asked to go do a television show in the UK, and I'm going to be gone for a month, and you won't be able to contact me. And he said, are you joking or is this serious? Because at the time, like now I'm a comedian at this point, so he thinks I'm just like, messing
big
with
jokester
him.
guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like a big jokester. Like he's going to mess with everybody. This Italian Medigan.
Typical Johnny Franklin.
Yeah, whatever. But I end up like calling him, and he calls my boss who lives in Ireland, like his boss who lives in Ireland. The next day, they put me in a meeting and said, you better win.
So the winner gets 100K, right?
Our season was 150. They like upped the pot while we were there.
That's right.
My boss was like, we've never dealt with this situation before. Don't know if we'll ever deal with it again. So like this is just gonna set a precedent. So like in like the bylaws of BetMGM, there's like the Franklin Compromise. like if you go
the one and only.
Yeah, like
I have one of those at KeyBank.
Yeah, see there you go.
One of those
get it.
And then when I got those, ironically enough, it was about a year later. KeyBank acquired this company, and a kid at the company ended up going on The Bachelor and then Bachelor in Paradise.
Way.
So he was calling me how to do it. I go, dude, I carved this out in HR. I've dealt with it all. All right, so how about the show? So 150K to win. Who won your season again? Frank. That's right. I thought I saw Frank on a Netflix show recently.
Yeah, he did another one.
It was a wealth management show.
Yes, that's it. It was How to Be Rich, and the host of that show is going to be here in about an hour and a half.
Oh, no way.
That's how I know.
There you
So
go.
he had 150K. He's like, how do I deal with it? And they help him out.
It's a lot of money real quick, man.
And once you're in the Netflix family, obviously they must take people from different shows.
You hope.
You're like, all right, give me the next show.
Yeah. Like, funny enough, I just had a meeting with them this week, like unscripted, and they were like, what's going on, what's new? I'm going to do Edinburgh Fringe, like the festival in Scotland in August. For a 9-show run. I'm just doing like 9 shows of stand-up.
Okay.
And they're like, they just happen to have people going out there. So they're just going to come check out the show. So they have like eyes everywhere.
Interesting.
Like they want to know what you're up to and if like you're keeping busy, because if you're doing well,
they're going to take you.
Yeah, they'll put you somewhere else.
I like that. All right. Well, on the first show that you did with them, you said they pay you a little bit. Do they get paid per episode, per week? You were there for 2 months. Did you make more than John?
Yeah, did you actually? Have we talked about that?
Yeah, I made more, but I was like freelancing when I lived in LA, so I was making $0 and 0 cents from any job, which was a large reason why I was leaving LA. I'd worked in corporate since I graduated college, and I could not find a role like that in LA. It was a lot of like bits and pieces of jobs, and it was like so stressful. So I wasn't getting paid from anyone else aside from the show, and I think it was like $100 a day or something. So I was there 2 months. I think it ended up being about $5,000.
Okay.
And they give you half 2 weeks after you get back from the show, and then the other half when the final episode of the show airs.
Got it. So about
Yeah.
5,000.
So
Is that about what you got too?
No, I got a little less than that. I think
Oh,
I got
because
about,
you were there for less time.
Yeah,
of
I think
course.
I got about like 3,000.
Okay,
if I remember
so-
correctly. But yeah, split in half.
Yeah, it's like nothing.
You're
That's
just like
such a discrepancy from like the winner.
If you didn't save up money and you have rent, how do you do that? Because you're going to get only a portion of it while like 2 weeks after you get back.
So it's fair to say if someone took your net worth and did it all, within that period of time, your net worth probably went down.
Yeah, for
Just
sure.
in that
Definitely,
period of time.
while you're filming the show,
Yeah,
no doubt
because
about
your
it.
expenses are greater than what you're making.
Yeah,
Unless you
absolutely.
win that 150K.
Right.
Interest. It's always a wild predicament when you are losing money to go on reality TV, but it can pay
Yeah.
huge dividends.
Of
One
course.
thing that I got to touch on, because people are always curious, and not a lot of listeners are from New York rent, around how much do you have to pay for New York rent?
Luckily, I'm paying New Jersey. I'm in Hoboken.
Oh, that's right. You're in Hoboken. That's
So
right.
yeah,
right,
so
okay.
Hoboken
Hoboken's
saves you some
less,
money.
right?
Hoboken's a little less. At this point, it's kind of starting to creep up there because
Okay.
more people. It's not a hidden gem anymore.
Yeah.
We're paying for a 2-bedroom. I pay $14.25.
And so
for the
two bedroom,
month.
you have a
Two-bedroom.
roommate around
Yeah.
how many square feet?
That's your guess as good as mine, man.
Okay,
You're talking to
okay.
a journalism major.
I,
I know that there's 4 doors
Yeah.
total in
Yeah.
the apartment
Yeah.
and a living space that coincides with the kitchen.
Perfect.
So that's
enough to shoot some content, get to New York.
Listen,
when you
I
need
could
to.
put a full green screen up in that.
There you
thing,
go.
so
That's
it's
all
good
you
enough
need.
for me.
That's all you need. Alyssa, are you in New York or are you in Hoboken?
I lived in New York City for like 8 years,
Okay.
and then I moved to LA, came back, and now I live with my parents because
Okay.
I wanted to
Stack
stockpile
that
money.
cash
Yeah.
right there.
I wanted, like, especially after COVID, my credit score, she was looking sad. I had a lot of things that I just wanted to catch up on, and that was the easiest way to do it. So I live with my parents now in Bedford in Westchester County.
Bedford, saving a couple bucks.
Yeah.
Lo-
I worked a corporate job for a little over a year, saved most of that money,
Okay.
and paid off a bunch of stuff. So my credit score is cute now. And then I could leave and pursue like everything else, like really go full-fledged into sex coaching and like a little bit of the influencing stuff.
Okay, we're going to get into both those things. Guys, we will also address the cost of New York City. It's now the most expensive city in the world. I got a cocktail last night. It was $30.
Isn't it
I was at a
insane?
hotel today.
Miserable.
I was at a hotel today, and for a fruit plate, they charged me $25 for a fruit plate.
A
I was
sin.
like, this is
Where'd
just
they get
getting
the fruit?
great. That's what I'm saying. Literally. Like, where did this come
Did
from?
they hunt
fa-
the fruit? Was it live
That's what I'm
fruit? Did it have
saying.
legs?
I
Did
don't
it
know
run?
what it had, but it was bullshit. But your credit score, can you
Yeah.
give someone the number one tip that you use to increase that, to make it cute, if you will?
Yes.
That's a good question.
I had a friend tell me once to be cash poor and credit rich.
Okay.
And that's implanted in my brain forever. And I don't think that it was really ever explained to me in that way. So I think just in general, credit literacy is really important to understand. If you can, even if you're putting everything on your card and you know you have the cash to pay it off, that'll, for me, it was a lot of like paying down a card that I'd used all throughout COVID while things were like terrible, and opening up a credit line once my credit score got better that had a much higher limit, so that my usage rate went down to like 5%.
There's a tip. Usage
Yeah.
rate, got to decrease it.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic, I have a manuscript for my second book. It's actually all about love and money, like talking money with your partner. You're here talking about your credit score being worse and
Yeah.
now getting better. And John, you're like, that's great. Let's talk about it. Do you two
Yeah.
as a couple talk about this stuff? Do you know what each other makes? Do you know your debt? Do you know your credit? What's your take on it all?
We are pretty open about like the money that we make.
Yeah.
Like as
Yeah.
we make it, for sure.
We were doing similar jobs, and so we would talk about what our salaries were like, especially when it came to negotiating on my end, because he's a lot better at asking. And
I love to open the conversation.
Yeah, like I'm
Like
not
I
as
love
good
to
at it.
talk about what I'm making.
About money and stuff. And
Like,
having these
well, not even
conversations.
just with Alyssa. I mean, like at my job, and like make sure I'm at least giving myself a chance to succeed and make the money that I should properly be making. I try to make sure that I know what's going on in the market for like social media management, social media content creation, see what I'm making versus like maybe some people who are doing similar jobs to me.
Okay.
But I used to tell Alyssa all the time, like it never hurts to just ask your boss or your direct report and being like, I want to see what steps I have to take to get a raise or to move to that next level.
Okay.
I do that very frequently and
Yeah,
aggressively.
pretty regularly.
Yeah. And Alyssa, that's not your forte.
I was just working at a company that was kind of small, and
Sure.
so I was asking pretty much the duration of the time I was there,
Yeah.
and I just kept getting like at the end of the year and pushing it and pushing it and pushing
Yeah.
it. And then when it finally came down to the year-end conversation, they were like, "You're so great, you're so valuable, we're going to give you $3,000 raise." So that was sort of where I drew the line. And he had gotten like several raises last year that were more than what I had gotten in
over
a
an
year.
annual basis.
So we talk about money in the sense that like it's a good barometer because
Yeah.
our roles are similar.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Let me ask you this for people back at home. John, you're comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
Alyssa, you'll talk about
I'll
it,
talk
but
about it,
you're
yeah.
just like, you're probably not going to go start the conversation with that. So let
Sure.
me ask you this, John.
Yeah.
If someone's out there and they want to start the conversation with their partner or their family member or a friend, whatever it might be, what is the best way to start the conversation? What have you found to be most successful?
I mean, I genuinely believe, like, from the jump, honesty. Like, it's just saying you want to have this conversation, but
Yeah.
not in a confrontational way. Money's a weird topic. Like, we know that.
Yeah.
Like, human nature is you don't want to talk about your finances with
Sure.
other human beings because, like, you don't want to think you're making less money or, like, you know, like, there's a lot of stigma around
But
it.
isn't it weird that like today, in today's world, we'll talk openly about all things sex,
money
relationship
is still
stuff,
taboo.
trauma, but
Yeah.
money still is a weird
It's
topic.
It's
think-
strange.
People attach a lot of like moral value to the money that you make and the money that you save and like how skilled you are at doing that. And all of that is really based on the opportunities that you've had.
That's true.
So it's also skewed, but everyone attaches this really weird moral value to it. And when
Yeah.
you strip that away and like realize it's ultimately it's numbers, there's so much of it that you control, but there's a whole lot of it that you don't.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it's better to be open. And one of the other things that I suggest all the time is if you're having a conversation that feels serious and feels heavy, for the love of God, don't say we need to have a talk. Don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
And also
that's just
don't say
relationship advice.
That's
just,
good
like,
relationship.
don't,
advice,
yeah.
huh?
Don't do the we have to have a talk later. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
just- yeah.
Like
Yeah.
never.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, you and I
Anxiety.
always, like, just, if we're going to talk about something.
Yeah,
we
we'll
can
just
talk
Bring it
talk
up
about
right there.
But yeah, like going back to your point too about the how to bring up that conversation. I'm sure you get this all the time too. Like, I have it with my parents who are older than me. They've been in like their industries respectively longer, and we make a lot like different money, things like that.
Yeah.
You just have to remember you're all people.
Yeah.
And you're all doing the same thing.
That's it.
You're just trying to live your life.
Yeah.
So just be honest.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Let me ask you this, Alyssa. You made the comment about like the moral connection to money. And there's also a moral connection, I think, to sex, right?
Yeah,
And so
totally.
you're a sex coach, and I always talk about like people. Let's say I'm having a beer and talking about trading secrets. Like, why do you think it's doing so well? It's hard in the podcast space. I'm like, well, if you think about Call Her Daddy, like everything in Call Her Daddy, it's the sex that sells it. That's what sold it. Then her brand and everything else escalated it.
Yeah.
And this show, the only thing that has really done it is like the transparency of money. And I'm like, that's interesting because there's kind of this weird dotted line to the sex discussions and the money discussions. Do you think, like, based on the way that you coach towards sex and it's held very high morally for some others, or they're judged based on what they do you see any type of connection between these conversations of sex and money at all?
Totally. I think a lot of it is when you neutralize the approach and you talk about it in a way where, like, if it's easy for me, it'll be way easier for you too. Like, if I can just talk about sex and sexuality and it rolls off the tongue, it's so much easier for people to be open with me. And that's kind of like how I got started in all of it, because I would have really open and frank conversations with all of my friends and their sex lives. So it was always easy for me to have those kinds of conversations, and people would come to me to have them.
So your takeaway is if you neutralize it,
Yeah.
it will open up a forum and a stage
Yeah.
for honesty. And I think you could do this with sex, money, or anything, but the way to neutralize it then is to be the first person to the table to talk openly about it.
You have to give trust to receive it. And so if you're going to be trusting and act trusting and like put that vulnerability on the table, whether it's money or sex, like it's the same thing they say with like religion and politics too. Like if you are vulnerable and you put the trust on the table, then people are a lot more likely to give it back to you and show that vulnerability.
Interesting. I like it. I think that's a good piece of advice for anyone out there that's looking to just have any type of conversation, money, sex, or anything, above or beneath. Let me ask you this. So you guys make the career transition. You're out of the circle. You're now in a relationship. You're working full time. You have your side hustle with the influencing, and now you're doing stand-up comedy, you're doing tours. So just your overall take. We've had so many people from reality shows that have come on this show,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had people say they've lost tons of money after the show because of like reputation and impact and haven't made a penny. We have some people that have made millions and millions and millions of dollars. Like, where within that barometer do you guys fit, and how do you just feel about the whole influencing career path after being on a show?
Yeah, I mean, I'm nowhere close to millions and millions and millions of dollars. I'm not Dr. Evil. But like, I feel comfortable in the money that I make, and like not all of it is like influencing or comedy based. It's mostly my regular job, but it's because like I enjoy my job that I stick with it. I really love the people that I work with and the thing that I do. But, you know, you got to remember with comedy, like, it's not a moneymaker unless you get to that next level right away. You know, like I didn't think I was coming off the show and I was going to be like Bert Kreischer or like Tom Segura, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I had been doing stand-up for a couple of years and I was kind of ready to just get back to the grind with a little bit more credit.
Yeah.
That worked out. So like money-wise, like it's good. Like brand deals come in here and there, and like different things happen. I just started a podcast myself. Like, you hope that works out. You just keep grinding at it because, you know, I'm 26. You put the money into it so you could get out of it, and like hopefully you get to that next level of making millions and millions and millions of dollars. So
It's a good take. It's a good take, and we'll come back to the comedy career because I do have questions about that.
Yeah, for sure.
What's your take on it?
I go back and forth with the influencing stuff because there's so much garbage that's just like cycled through social media.
That's true.
And I want to be able to be valuable to anybody who follows me. I really would like to contribute to the betterment of the people who follow me. So I try really hard not to take like any sort of brand deal that it doesn't align with what I'm doing. For now, that's sustaining me enough until I'm fully certified as a sex coach, because I also don't really feel comfortable practicing and taking private clients until I have that certification. It just kind of feels unethical, and it feels sort of like using my name to take advantage of people. I'm so cautious of that, and I don't want to sell people things they don't need. Like, it just, that feels really icky and weird. That's like why I left marketing, and I didn't want to like get back into that same cycle again. So I'm able to make, I would say, comparable to what I made at my corporate job.
Okay.
So it's not like crazy money, but it's enough to sustain myself, especially living at home. That helps tremendously.
I think what's cool about both of your professions, at least as being a comedian and a sex therapist, sex coach, is that social media is going to help magnify both of those.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, once you are booking the one-on-ones and possibly master classes, and they'll help you continue to sell tickets and do all that. So the more you put into that, it'll not only help you get brand deals, but also it will fuel what you're doing.
Yeah.
I want to get into both of your careers now. Let's talk about like just the sex coach angle of it. So as a sex coach, what is, like, I just don't know anything about that industry. What does someone pay like a licensed sex therapist for a session? How does that work?
So to make the quick distinction, a therapist would be a regular therapist who has a master's degree or a PhD, and then they do this like further education, and you get certified by ASACT, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists.
Okay.
And that certification process is the same one that I will do to be a coach, but I don't have the clinical background. So I will never call myself a therapist because I don't have that training yet. I would like to do that sometime in the future. But for the coaching certification, you have to do this coursework. It's a lot of like reading journals and textbooks. It's like a regular coursework type of thing. Then you test out of that whatever your program is, and then you have to do 1,000 supervised hours. And then you're certified by ASACT. When you do all of that, then you can, like, you're a coach, so you can decide however much you want to get paid. My boss was getting paid thousands of dollars from her clients. Plural, thousands from her clients.
So like what would you say on average sex coach? Because
would
you would
say-
be then a sex coach. Once you're fully do all your work, you'll be a sex coach. What would an average coaching session be?
So I think it depends on if you're going to sell in a set or you're going to sell individually. So she would sell in a set, so she would get like, you know, at least $1,400 from each person that she like had signed on. So for me, I think I would probably do something more individual and align closer to like similar to a therapist, but less. So like out-of-pocket therapists are usually like $150 to $200 an hour. So I would probably do like the lower end, like $100 a session or $75 a session. It depends on deciding if I want to specialize in anything. Like you can specialize in like kink or whatever, polyamorous relationships. If I specialize, it'll be a little different. If I do sort of the general thing, it'll probably be like $75 a session, $100 a session.
If you look at medicine, there's specialties where you can make way more. Is there a specialty where you can make more?
Yeah, totally. If you specialize in things like kinks, you would absolutely make more, because those are things that also it's a specialty, so the knowledge alone is valuable, but you're also dealing with things that could potentially be dangerous and risky behaviors. So there's a little bit more of like the security in being like properly educated on how to go about those things.
Wild. Okay.
Yeah.
I have just one more question on this industry. I'm a big takeaway guy. Like I always like to take all your experiences and then give it to the listeners in like one bit.
That would be a kink.
What's it? That would be a kick.
That's a
kick.
Yeah,
we should probably talk about how much are you an hour? So let's talk about that kick of mine. What do you think? What would you say are the biggest either misconceptions or takeaways that people that have never done any type of sex coaching or sex therapy in the past get from usually going on board and meeting with a sex coach or therapist?
It's a lot less scary than you think it is, because the people who are having those conversations will neutralize them for you.
Yeah. What are most people taking away from those?
It can really be whatever you want. Like in any other therapy situation, you set your own goals. But I would say like the biggest overarching takeaways would be improving your communication.
Okay.
Reducing any shame that you might have, that we all have related to sexuality, and like really big boosts in confidence, because you'll feel more confident in yourself and also the things that you do with your partner, because you have all of this information to back up everything that you are interested in, and you'll feel confident in wanting to try new things. And sexuality is such a big part of our lives. People sort of disregard it as being like a small part of your relationship. It doesn't have to be that way. There's a ton of things that you can do to work on your sex life and your own sexuality, even independently. And it's not impossible. It's very doable, and it improves so much of your self-esteem and the entirety of your relationships.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, this is like a business finance podcast, but I still think the link to sex, physical health, mental health, this whole foundation personally, 1,000,000% connects to professional success.
Yes,
right? Like
100%.
how are you taking yourself in the workplace? What are you manifesting? Are you dreaming bigger because you are more confident?
Yeah.
Are you feeling more secure about yourself because you're so secure in your relationship? You're taking bigger shots at work or whatever it might be. So I think there actually is a lot of time.
And there's a lot of studies that show that people who are critical of themselves are more likely to be less successful, lonelier, have really unsatisfying sex lives. So putting a lot of pressure on yourself, the way that we do even in our finances, in our sexuality, in our relationships, negatively affects our performance.
Interesting.
And so if you can find ways to build confidence in yourself, it carries over into all of these other choices that you make. Like if you can imagine if you can be so confident in the bedroom that you can request literally anything from your partner, and even if they say no, you are able to verbalize that, how successful you would be in a situation where like you have to negotiate for your salary. If you can do that, you can absolutely do the other things.
And that's got to be like a correlated theme. The more critical you are in yourself, whatever it might be. Might be sex, maybe it's interviewing, maybe it's friendships, right? Maybe it's finances. You're critical on yourself. You probably have more shame around it, less confidence, and it's probably impacting you.
Yeah, it's been studied. That's a true correlation.
Tell me if this is a fair takeaway. My therapist had told me I had never had someone attempt to convince me that everything in their life was perfect and the last thing they needed was me. Great parents, they're married, I really don't have trauma, my brother and I are great, no big issues growing up. And one of the biggest takeaways I've had from therapy of the years and years I've done it now is that every single person in the world, no matter who you are, you have trauma. Do you want to step into it or not? It sounds like when you meet with a sex coach or therapist, one of the big takeaways is in some capacity we all have some type of fear or shame around sex.
100%.
And we should just address that and know that everyone does.
Our parents and our education system are not equipped to teach us any of sex education the
Another
appropriate
parallel
way.
between sex and money.
Yep.
We're not taught in our school system.
100%. We're not taught.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because those are things that are literally the fundamentals of life, like sex and relationships and money. Like how are we going through all of this education and not it still shocks me that we did not get any sort of like credit literacy.
I think it's because people genuinely get nervous to talk about it. Like they find
Both
it
of those.
taboo.
But in,
yeah,
like,
both
in
of them.
school-
So, well,
Yeah.
but the thing about school is like now, if you petition that, you get so many like politics involved.
Yeah.
And then people will be like, well, our kids don't need to learn about
Right.
that. And it's
Right.
like,
And
Yeah.
no,
again-
because we all grow up saying, what the fuck you should have
Right.
taught
Like,
us.
do you remember? Like, there's a moment in all of our lives where you open your first credit card, or like the first time like you have sex in your life.
Yes.
And you're like, I have no base knowledge of either of these things. I might as well be having sex with my credit card. Like I don't know what I'm doing, so I might as well make my life easy.
Yeah, seriously. And the ramifications of both. Obviously, you see like teen moms and stuff. You have
Yeah.
sex with,
Yeah.
you don't know what you're doing. You might
Yeah.
have a kid.
And then they make a
young
TV
age.
show out of
Yeah,
it.
Right, right.
Or you might
Like-
rack up credit card debt, and then you got
100%.
another Netflix
And they
show.
make
out
a
of it.
TV show
Wow,
out of
we
it.
have figured out
Totally.
the entire world in about 10
Guys,
minutes.
we can have a TV show ourselves.
Sex ed
That's it.
solves everything, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, sex ed and money and financial literacy, and
Yes,
the world
be
goes
great.
round. I
Yeah.
love it. All right, John, before we wrap up, I got to get into
Let's do it.
the whole comedy space.
Sure.
You said it's tough to make money early on. How does a comedian make money early on?
You get big. You try to make a following, and you try to go on tour, and you try to sell tickets. Being a comedian is, especially in New York City, just a grind. I'll be the first to tell you, like, I could do better at it. Anybody can probably do better at it. You have to be doing shows every single night to make it in New York City.
How
And
much do you make if you do a show?
you probably don't get paid.
Oh, a lot of bars and stuff won't pay
A
you.
lot of clubs don't pay you. Like,
Do they
they'll pay
tip
a
you or
headliner.
something?
They'll pay a headliner, but they won't pay like a third guy up in the lineup type of a comedian. I've only ever been paid when I've headlined, I've done a college, or if I've like when I shot and filmed my own special. You don't make money regularly because the time to those in the industry is so valuable. 7 minutes on stage in New York, you might get discovered and you might go on late night. And then, like, hypothetically, you make your money.
Crazy.
Back in the day, the way comedy worked was you do your 5 minutes, you get your tight 5. Hopefully, you get your tight 5 on stage.
Your
in
what?
Tight 5.
What's like
5 minutes?
tight minutes of just
5
riffing?
minutes of good, strong comedy that makes you laugh throughout the entire thing.
How many hours does it take to get 5 tight minutes?
That's a great
What do you call it?
question.
5 tight minutes?
A tight 5.
A tight 5. Okay. A towel.
I mean, I felt comfortable doing my 5 minutes about a year into comedy. That first year, you don't know what your style is. You don't know what you're going to be like. And I found that I was a storyteller. So, like, my first tight 5 was based around being, like, a theater kid in high school and how, like, by being, like, the only straight guy in theater, there were a lot of assumptions made about me. And it was just a lot of the stories that I could tell. But the regular lineage of that was you would get your tight 5 minutes, and you would end up on late night. From late night, you'd go to Just for Laughs in Montreal. Then you'd hopefully get an HBO special and get on Netflix different stuff. Now, it's so different with the internet. I mean, you see people who have 1 million followers on TikTok that might have done 10 minutes of stand-up in their life, but they're funny to a platform.
Yeah.
And they can sell tickets. I'll never forget, I did a show where the headliner was a girl who had like 4 million followers on TikTok, and I had never heard of her.
Okay.
And her whole thing on TikTok that people thought was hilarious was she would like talk, and shut herself up by shoving her fist in her mouth.
my God.
And when she went on stage to do her time, she was bombing, and then just did that, and people went ballistic.
Isn't that
It's a
nuts?
different space now, man. It's so different than what it was back in the day. But I love it. My goal is to get into more hosting and writing.
I'm also trying to create parallels to someone who like fucks up a presentation. You're sitting there in front of, I don't know, let's say 50, 100, how many people,
Sure.
and they're looking at you blank-eyed, and you're just sucking. What do you do?
The worst moment in your life is when you tell a joke that you think is so funny. You think it's like, you're like, this is like Seinfeld. This is so funny.
Yeah.
And you hit the punchline and you're like,
Yeah,
And
and no
everybody
one
here
is
is like-
like, it's crickets.
Oh, God.
and then you're like, all right.
It's awkward too. It's like I'm thinking about. I'm like my heart's racing. Thinking
Yeah.
about.
And the only thing that the advice or like the thought that I could have paralleling it to a presentation or different things of that sort is you got to get to the end. Like
The show goes on.
yeah, you
Show goes on.
cannot look at that first joke or that first moment where you know this is over and think, I can just walk off stage, because you can't. Like, you're up there for 5, 7, 10, however many minutes, and you got to get to the rest because there's a whole show around you. In New York, there's maybe 8 comics on one show.
Yeah.
And if you screw the pooch on like your timing,
Yeah.
you could ruin the show. So like if you're presenting something, let's say you work for a company and you're like trying to pitch something to some group of people and your one section of that pitch goes awful from the jump, that's the chain weakest link parallel all day. You better get it to the end because the next person might be able to pick you up and you might be fine. But if you falter right there, you'll ruin it for everybody, not just yourself.
Yeah. To me, it's like the draw I'm taking from this is like if the plane's crashing, don't let it go up in flames. Like find a way to bring it down, minimize liability.
Absolutely.
Because even though it crashes and you could still save that plane, you could save your passengers, you could save a lot of things.
That's
and
why,
like you said, if someone else comes on and rips it, no one's going to remember like like you're fine.
Right.
Like you're fine. Just next one you crush.
And that's why crowd work is like so valuable now, especially on the social media. It's like gold. Because like when you bomb, like if you could find 2 really good minutes of crowd work, the crowd will only remember that time because they were a part of it.
And good crowd work. To me, I'd rather go see someone that's just like brilliant. I don't know if you take offense to this, but like brilliant at crowd work than like stand up. It's so funny.
Yeah.
When they can quickly just rip someone and like everyone can laugh.
But
it's
even
amazing.
just like that, I think is also a testament to knowing your audience. Like you're good at that too. Like if one joke is like not really landing well, you're good at like adjusting to find. And I think that also applies even in like in presentation settings. Like know your audience enough to know what they're going to look for from you, because that's going to change.
You got to be able to pivot on the fly. I go on stage and I don't think like I got 10 minutes, here are my 10 minutes, here are the jokes that I'm doing. These are 10 minutes of jokes, but in the back of my mind I'm like, if these aren't going to work for this audience, I have like 5 or 6 more that I could just plug and play into this lineup. So like you got to get up there and like if they're just not catering to the jokes you're doing, you got to be like, I'm not going to power through exactly what I wrote here. I'm going to just go back to the drawing board. I have hours of material that just exist.
I love it.
And, you know, like you just got to be able to take from it and plug it and use it.
Pivot. I like the idea of the pivot, right? You pivot if you're on stage. You might have to pivot if you're struggling with your sex life. You might have to pivot if your credit's struggling and you want to get it improved.
Totally.
I think we figured out that jokes, money, and sex. That's the name of this podcast, and that's what makes the world go around. All right, jokes, money, and sex, here we go. But we got to wrap up with a trading secret. One secret that nobody can read in a textbook. They can't get it online. They can't Google it. They can only get it from your stories based on what you do, who you know, what you've gone through. So I need a trading secret from each of you.
My whole journey professionally has been doing what I wanted and having the money follow. And people say that all the time. But honestly, being able to pivot and knowing that you can restart your life anytime. If you really hate what you're doing and it's making it impossible to move forward in whatever path you're currently in, you absolutely 100% can find a way to change course of that. And that is within your own power. You can do that. I remember once my brother said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I feel like that applies a lot of the time. Like work is not always going to be fun, but you can absolutely take control of parts of it to make it something that you enjoy, and you'll be way more likely to push yourself and want to commit yourself to it in a different way when it's something that you love. I did like a hard reset, and now I'm doing all of this stuff now.
And I think your career journey speaks to that, right? Working from Lance Bass to marketing and beauty to going on a reality TV show to now working towards becoming a sex coach. Like,
totally.
Take care of your path, take control of it, because if you don't, someone else will. All right, John, trading secret.
Yeah, I got mine. So one of my favorite sayings ever is at the end of the game, the king and the pawn end up in the same box. So live your life the way you want to live it. We're all going to live it and end it like at some point the same way. And in that time, try everything. There's nothing that you can't try that's going to hurt you. You have to put yourself out there and do those things, especially valuing the relationships of people around you.
In the same box that also connects. Oh, look at those are your tats.
Yeah, dude.
Oh my God. So you live your life by this saying. Yeah. I love this saying. This is a weird thing, but Lo has come up. Everyone knows Lo who listens to the show. He's come on the show. The other day he was working out in a cemetery. I was like, dude, what are you doing? But he like justified it by saying it's a big Hollywood cemetery. So it's in Hollywood. There's like all these huge stars. All people come to like see certain people, and they have like all these things. And then he's like showing me some of the massive, massive names that are there. And it got me thinking, I'm like, how crazy is it? Like some of the people he was showing at one point took over the world, like owned the world. The entire planet was theirs. And now it's just like a stone with a picture. And for some reason, that whole story with Lo and I made me just realize man, life is quick. And once you're gone, leave a
what I'm
legacy
saying.
and stuff. But like it's done. On to the next.
Nobody's
Yeah.
going to remember the most embarrassing moment of your life besides you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Just do
so
all
do
of the
a lot of
things.
embarrassing things because one
Yeah.
of them's going to turn out to be the rest of your life in a really good way.
Yeah,
Exactly.
totally.
And it goes quick. I love it. Those are two great trading secrets. John and Alyssa, where can everyone find you and your socials and all your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at _JohnFranklin__. I'm never gonna be the first one.
Jesus.
so like I got
a lot of underscores.
I know I got
They changed it to like an ad or
a
something.
lot of different tricks there. TikTok is at John Franklin Comedy. That was easy to find. So that's really good one. I'm working on a new character on there. I'm really excited about. And I am dropping my first comedy special, came out on YouTube, and it is actually going to come out on Tubi this summer. So look out for that. And then if you're in Scotland, you want to go catch me at my 9-show run at Fringe, come say what's up.
So
I
excited.
love
For that.
it.
I'll be there too.
Alyssa?
And you can find me on Instagram. I'm not so hot on TikTok, but on Instagram at Alyssa Ljub, ALYSSALJUB. And I also have a podcast that comes out with episodes every Tuesday. It's called Alyssa Explains It All. We have sex educators. We have, I don't know, just like people from all walks of life on there to talk about sexuality, and we learn a lot on that podcast. So join me there every Tuesday. Find me on Instagram. I think that's it.
And I have one more. We just dropped a podcast, my roommate and I, called On a Related Note. We market it as the escape room of podcasts.
It is.
Different guests coming on every week. We got Shay Dorena coming on. We got a bunch of different cool people. You go in, it's a game show catered
fun.
towards the guest.
Oh, wow.
And they try to figure out what the overarching theme of the episode is by the end. On a Related Note pod on all social platforms.
Yeah.
All right. Both podcasts seem great. The career directions are awesome. You guys have the sex figured out and the jokes, and it
Yeah.
sounds like you got the money. So that's the name of this episode, Sex, Jokes, and Money. And it sounds like you guys have it all going for you. So thank you for being on this episode of Trading Secrets.
Dude, thank you so much for
you.
having us.